I'm going to try and explain PostHog pricing the most simple way possible. What PostHog has done is make transparency very, very open. It's very open about every single piece of their pricing model is transparent. That transparency breeds complexity around convolution of how much are you going to pay. And we've done, I think, a north of 20 PostHog implementations so far as of this point, and we are just seeing more and more people asking for PostHog. And so I'm going to try and explain this in the best possible way so you understand how this pricing works. And let's first start off with how PostHog works, and this is a very simple, diluted down way of doing things, is we first have the website, so web analytics, and then we also have product data. And you can define your product, whether that's like PLG or whether you have actual utilization. Just think of it as like people interacting with your product versus people interacting with a website. Again, just for simplicity's sake. That data is sent into PostHog, and then it is sent onwards to either ad platforms, reporting, automations, warehouses, etc. That is the core function of PostHog. Then they have a bunch of other things that are living inside of PostHog that you can choose to use or not use. Okay. The first thing you're going to look at is the idea of an event. There is the idea of an anonymous event and then an identified event. We usually recommend most people to use the identified events over anonymous events because it builds a person profile as you have more and more people entering, and then you have that history of that anonymous event that turns into a person profile. More on that in a second. So we have anonymous events and then I have identify events. Those are the two types of events we're going to look at. So PostHog gives you 1 million events free. And every single one of their tools is going to be very similar. So let me show you this in their pricing calculator, and you can do this. The quick and dirty math of it, everyone's like, how many users? One user is like between 20 and 50 events on average. That's what we're seeing. Again, you can add a lot of different ways to do this. So product analytics and web analytics. Let me just make this simple because we'll start with your high worst case scenario. All right, so you get 1 million events free. So if you come down here, you are rocking $0. So if you have less than, I don't know, 10,000 users a month, you are totally fine. It'll be free. And then you can see here, as your billing goes up with identified events, you will see how that price does increase. So let me show you this. If you have 1 million people who've been identified, or 2.5 million people who have been identified, you have a $300 a month bill. Let's look at that from a web analytics perspective of the anonymous events, right? So let's just say you have 1 million users, and then you have 10 million events on the website. You'd look at about $300. So you can play with these on your implementation to get your bill where you'd want it to be. And there are pros and cons to both different ways of doing things, just so you know. Hey, quick interruption. If you would like to have us take a look at your PostHog implementation or interested in looking at PostHog, go to visionlabs.com/PostHog. We'll take a look. We will see if it's a right fit for you. We'll see how your current implementation is doing from product and marketing and reporting, so you can start making that data sing inside of PostHog or build out custom reports outside of PostHog, which some people really, really do like. Then we have the idea of a mobile app. Again, the same idea around anonymous events and then the identify events. The one thing to notice here is that these are counted together. So even though mobile app is a checkbox here, it's just events, right? Their events are events are events. So just keep that in mind there. These here, again, it all kind of rolls together. So then there's this idea of group analytics. Group analytics is if you have an organization that has multiple people that you want to tie the group together. I think in general, maybe like two of our customers that use this. It's really helpful if you need it. And then you can see here how that shows in of per that event, you are paying a per event price. And then you can see of if you have a lot of people that are logging into your events, that is how it's going to work. Then we have data pipelines. So data pipelines are where you're sending data, if you hover over this. Basically anywhere, BigQuery, Redshift, etc. You even include this as Meta and other destinations there. That is the straightforward, right? That is level 1 of complexity. If you're trying to parody something in Google Analytics, I would say this is what you're going to do. You're going to come in here, you're going to tie your number of events and just put your identify events at the number of users and the number of website analytics and number of events you have in GA4, and that will give you a ballpark estimate. If you don't have that, just do number of users times 50, and that'll probably get you close enough as far as the events if you are just sending in manual events. There's a lot of other ways you can do that as well. So then you have these add-ons. So there's a Boost, Scale, and Enterprise add-on. The Boost and Scale, like most people just use Boost. I don't think you need both. Basically, if you want to be HIPAA compliant, if you want to have SSO, and you want to have a few other team member collaborations, that will be the add-on. And that's, again, if $200 is not a lot to your budget, then you can add that on, and it makes a lot of quality of life improvements. Okay, then we have all the other pieces around this analytics tool. So we have these session replays. So by default, 5,000 session replays is what you get. This is the most expensive part of the product. If you do not want to have your bill go astronomically high, watch out for session replays. Okay, so that is what you're going to really want to look out for. So here, if you start dragging this up and you want 120,000, you'll be at $300. And this is where you'd want to maybe want to use this and decide if you want to parity that with like Microsoft Clarity, for example. So the 5,000 session recordings, usually we cap that, and then we use them strategically throughout the instance, whether you want to have them record the homepage or your product pages or whatever you're specifically trying to look at, or you can keep them on and it will just run through 5,000 on day one. It doesn't really matter. The other few things, I'm going to group these together, is feature flags. We have not hit, this is usually not a budget problem, right? This is usually, they're very, very cheap, and you don't usually use a lot of them unless you're using a lot of feature flags to tag your product. Most of the time, we can just do that with an event. So there's that. Surveys, you usually want to pair this with a Boost add-on to remove the branding because by default there is branding on the surveys. But again, survey responses are really cheap, and they just lowered the pricing as of recording this on October 1st there. We then have warehousing and pipelines. So they recently, as I say recently, in the last month in September, they broke these apart. So now your data pipelines are for real-time destinations. This is like your Meta, etc. On that. And then you have the data warehousing, which is putting things into like BigQuery and those type of things. It's really, really economical here. You can see that there. And lastly, we have the error tracking, right? So we don't normally see this as a very utilized feature, but it is there. And then the LM Analytics as well. I don't know. It's a newer feature that we have not utilized that much. That is your product pricing. Again, product analytics is the bulk. Then session replays, which you can turn on down. And feature flags and surveys are features that if you use them and you find value in them, they are there. So the question is how does this compare? If you're comparing something like GA360 into PostHog, the parity will be very interesting because let's just look at that from a straight utilization perspective. I'm going to go ahead and reset this. And let's look at just anonymous website analytics. So GA360 by default is $4,200 a month, and that gets you 25 million events with that BigQuery export. So let's just say we have 25 million events, and we want to also have the data pipeline here as well, right? So we would be at $1,300 for the exact same parity of GA4 at minimum, with a lot more if you're at that 25 million website analytic events. It's about 25% of the cost. $4,200 is what you'd be at, and then this is on-demand pricing. So there you go. If you start adding in other things, so say you wanted to have, let's just say 10 million active users, you will start to see that go up. And we want to make sure that data pipelines are usually on, like again, just to parity the same BigQuery function. And there you go. So again, about half the cost is what we're seeing from a GA360 account if you are going to do that and just keep the base plan. If you want to add on the enterprise function, that will add in $2,000 and you'll be about paritied there. You'll see a lot of these features on the enterprise where you do have dedicated support, you do have all the Boost and Scale add-ons, and then you also have all these other features that you get those basic limits with. So that is where you're going to be as far as pricing goes. Usually, I'd say most people are sub $1,000 per month, and it's very, very economical especially when you compare it to all of the other options on the market. It really does shine because you do have the ability to turn on all these features within one tool and have almost everything parodied right there.